The aforementioned Jeff Van Gundy, former NBA coach, now analyst, of course, with ESPN and ABC, joining us. He's got Rockets Clippers, 7:30 Eastern tonight. Let me start with what McLovin just said to me, Jeff. You're starting your team, Trey Young or Luka Doncic?
Doncic, but that's not to negate what Trey Young is capable of doing. I was able to coach him on the USA Select team this summer as we prepared for the World Cup. And this guy is a brilliant pick-and-roll player. You know, he's a little undersized. He can be impacted by trapping the pick-and-roll, which I'm surprised more teams aren't doing. And defensively, he still has a ways to go. But as a passer and a pick-and-roll player, this guy, he's dynamic.
I know we love to have comparisons all the time, Coach, and he reminds me a little bit of what Chris Jackson used to be. When Chris Jackson was in college, that first year at LSU with Shaq, he was unbelievable. He had great handle, really quick release, undersized a little bit, and, of course, became Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf. And then we were having this discussion. Could Trey Young have been successful 25 years ago, 20 years ago, the way the NBA was officiated, the way you played 20 years ago?
Well, it's just, I mean, the undersized guards, particularly the slight guards, you know, they had more trouble back then because of the hand check, because of the physicality that was allowed. And so, it's a different sport now. It's built, and you're not punished for being smaller. And the one thing that I think Trey Young has that maybe, you know, Chris Jackson didn't when he was at LSU was he's a phenomenal passer. Mm-hmm. Now, sometimes he doesn't, you know, back at Oklahoma, maybe he couldn't pass as much because maybe he wasn't surrounded by, you know, great offensive players. I didn't watch him a lot in college, but in the NBA, this guy, he is a terrific passer. I mean, his passing ability to me is his greatest strength. And so when he makes he'd make 8 threes last night, I mean, you're impossible to guard.
You got the Rockets and the Clippers. Let me start with the Clippers. What's your biggest question about the Clippers so far?
None. Zero. No questions. You know,
wow.
If they're healthy, they're a great team. I love what they've built there. You know, back with the Chris Paul trade, everybody said, you know, they lost the trade. And now you might say they did as well as Houston did because Montrezl Harrell, Lou Williams gives them such a Patrick Beverly. They have so many components that surround Kawhi Leonard. And when Paul George gets back, Paul George, I think they're a great team. I have no questions about them.
Do you have any concerns about load management? If you were Doc Rivers, do you care how many games Paul George and Kawhi Leonard play if they are healthy?
Yeah, I think you have concerns because you know that home court advantage, despite what everybody tells you, is important. You want to have it as in many rounds as you can. They, you know, the more they sit, obviously, the harder it is. Last year, Toronto was an anomaly. They actually played at a higher winning percentage without Kawhi Leonard in the regular season than with him. But Doc Rivers knows, you know, that you lose your best players for periods of time. You know, you don't win as much. So, I think he's probably concerned. But I think they went into this with their eyes wide open. I don't think the Clippers right now are dictating when Kawhi Leonard sits. I think, you know, they knew this is what he wants to do. This is how he wants to approach his career. And like any other team, they accepted that. He was going to play less, but they were going to get a great, great player. And I think, you know, Leonard, you know, he's certainly been great. And I may not like it myself. I think it's bad for the business of basketball. I think we take our consumers far too much for granted. But really, when you think about load management, Dan, there's very few people who are practicing it. It's more the star players. Mm-hmm. And then also, you know, the unfortunate part is, you know, everybody tells you sports science is preventing injuries. All I see is more and more guys being hurt now. And I wish I knew why all these injuries were taking place when we're practicing less, when we're having less contact in practice, fewer practices, or I wonder if it's because they're not as conditioned or not as used to the contact to be able to withstand it. I wish I knew why every year we seem to have more and more injuries versus less and less with all these scientists at the forefront of injury prevention.
Yeah, it's interesting. We're talking to Jeff Van Gundy. ESPN brings you the Clippers-Rockets tonight, 7:30 Eastern, joining us, Continental Tire Coach's Corner. Reggie Miller and I have been going back and forth. I said, look, LeBron...
Well, then I agree with you right away. I don't even know what the subject is.
Well, I don't know. I said LeBron is still a better player than Kawhi Leonard.
Well, you're right about comparisons. To me, comparison is the thief of joy, because it makes you choose. And whenever you choose, like Doncic or Trey Young, it seems to diminish the other guy versus prop up the guy you praise. I always say when you come to these things, I'll give you first pick, and I'm happy with pick number 2. Like if you want James, if I get Kawhi Leonard, I'm more than happy. So I think, like LeBron James, the thing that I'm most impressed this year with, Dan, is a rejuvenation at the defensive end of the floor.
Absolutely.
This guy is playing hard, and he is leading, and he's inspiring. And then obviously his vision and all that sort of stuff is still off the charts, but it's the commitment he has shown at the defensive end, but also it's brought his teammates around along with Frank Vogel. And I think Frank Vogel, I think we're forgetting how good a coach he is. I think what he did with Indiana was spectacular. In Orlando, he wasn't given a good team at all. But now with the Lakers, I think he's showing the touch that he has, particularly at that end of the floor, to get guys to play hard.
I'll leave you with this because I'm sure this will be a topic tonight, and that's James Harden and initiating contact, getting to the free throw line. And this is historical that he's shooting more free throws in the first 10 games in the history of the sport here. So how do you officiate him? If you were Doc Rivers tonight looking at the officiating on James Harden, what can you point out to say, give my guys a chance here?
Well, I think everybody needs to take a page from the Spurs book. When the Spurs guard him, they do it in such a manner to over-exaggerate showing their hands. People get into, like, trying to get into him, and, they get into his airspace, and, like, he's so strong and he's so adept at drawing contact, initiating contact, selling contact, that, like, I think first of all, don't contest his three-point shot. When you have to lunge at him, he draws those shooting fouls. That's 3 to 6 free throws a game right there. Take those out. Make him make the shot, okay? Secondly, like San Antonio does, play with your hands out wide. Never, ever, ever, never, ever reach in and try to strip. He's too strong. He's too good, and that's where he gets contact. I think if you take away those type of fouls, you can keep him to a manageable 6 to 8 free throws, but it requires great discipline, particularly if he's making shots that you don't get frustrated. So I think it starts with discipline. It starts with taking a page out of the Spurs playbook.
I think that's great. And I think the whole keeping your hands where you have your hands so he can't use your hands against you is really a sneaky little tip there. And, leave it to Popovich to figure that out.
Yeah, I mean, it's like when it's so awkward that you play with your hands out and like up, it's like it's different, because usually you're telling your players, get your hands active, poke at the ball, try to disrupt them. But trying to disrupt James Harden, as you said, it works to his advantage because he can use all of that to work his way to a free throw line. And you have to make him make shots. You can't take everything away from a great player, Dan, or they wouldn't be a great player. But you have to take away something. And I think the one thing you have your best chance of taking away from Harden is the free throw line if you're disciplined. And I think the second thing is that I'm surprised more teams don't do. Golden State, I had them last week against Houston when they put out that, they don't have a really good team right now. but they doubled Harden on his wing isolation more than I had seen. And I think more teams should double Harden on the wing when he's isolating, particularly late in the clock, and make other guys shoot the ball and make plays off the dribble. I don't understand why you leave the best offensive player one-on-one, sometimes against five men. To me, that makes no sense.
You sound like a coach. Why aren't you doing that?
Oh, broadcasting, you can fake coach and just say, yeah, that was my idea after the game. They should have done this after the game. It's great.
Oh,
you can't be wrong.
Yeah. Hey, have fun tonight. We appreciate your time as always, Jeff. Thank you.
Anytime, Dan.
And that's Jeff Van Gundy.
For more Dan Patrick Show, tune into Audience Channel 239 on DirecTV. Stream for free on BR Live or download the Dan Patrick Show app.